Welcome to Things That Matter, featuring Farm to Market, caring for kids, and age-reversing health. It's all coming right up on Things That Matter. Now, please welcome your host, Carl Krebs.
Well, good evening. Good afternoon from the highways and byways of Canada. This is Carl Krebs for Things That Matter. And welcome to this later version. We had to make a change. I'm thankful that you've decided to join us. Hopefully, many more will join us afterward. But on tonight's show, we got a good show. Absent of my co-hosts, I've decided to go ahead and put together a very good show. We want to talk about those parental consent forms that we talked about last week. We want to talk about the truth and reconciliation from a slightly different perspective. And I want to get into something of a presentation on age reversal. But right now, have a listen to how you can get rid of pain, improve your sleep, and increase your energy. This is a word from LifeWave.
Imagine having no pain, sleeping through the night, having more energy, and reversing the aging process. Now imagine LifeWave doing that all naturally, without the use of harmful drugs. X39 is the most advanced patented light therapy in the world. LightWave is a simple wearable patch that you place on your body that stimulates the body to regenerate and heal itself. With more than 20 years of research and over 100 patents, LifeWave specializes in age-reversing all-natural health. Find out what the power of the patch can do for you. For more information or to join our LifeWave community, go to Thingsthatmatter.ca/LifeWave. LifeWave, reversing the aging process naturally without the use of harmful drugs.
Well, welcome back to Things That Matter. I'm your host, Carl Krebs, and thank you for joining us at this later time, 8 o'clock, as opposed to our 6:30 hour, but we make these adjustments. I want you to know that I'm committed to being here every Thursday, and that sometimes we'll even make concessions to be here. But it's important that we do have this time together talking about things that truly matter, and I'm committed to bringing that to you. I want to assure you that I'm not an expert on a lot of what I'm saying. What I am is a purveyor of truth and facts so that you can, in your own mind, be a discerner of what you believe to be true. And we know that in the country we live in, with the restrictions on the transmission and communication of news, actual news in this country, it's important even more than it ever has been, that you seek alternative media sources. I present myself as an alternative media source, hopefully, that you can learn something from. Now, let me get into the segment here, because we have a slightly different format tonight with my co-host Harry Siemens off on some personal business, and Judy Friesen, my 38-year health coach, co-host. She's in Japan right now, but that did not dissuade me at all from doing the show. So I have some really good presentations to bring you. And first and foremost, I want to bring back the topic that we raised last week with my co-host guests, David Zacharias and Pierre from Action for Canada. We talked about these parental consent forms, and a lot of you have reached out to me and to others to find out more about them. As we promised, those NOLs are now on our website. So let me take you there and show you where you can find our parental consent forms. And we want to make sure that this becomes important to you. So this is our Things That Matter website. I don't know that guy. He pops up everywhere. We're going to have to do something about him. But this is our website at Thingsthatmatter.ca. And if you go into the menu area, and I just want to bring you back. I was taking a little bit down here to show you this website is a work in progress. Here we have our different segments, farm to market, and we are updating as we go along to bring you the most current versions. These are past versions that we've done, and you can look at the different segments of it and so forth. But let me take you up to the menu part here, right over here on the left. And if you click on that, you're going to come up with Caring for Kids. This is where you're going to find these parental consent forms. And on Caring for Kids, we truly are about restoring and preserving the innocence of our children. You know, if you Google that, the innocence of childhood, you find out that kids are in many ways terribly innocent, and our children deserve to have that time, which is a special time in life that never returns. We want to protect them from the complexities and the challenges that face us later as adults. So in this section here, I want to point to the fact that we are committed to caring for them and provide parents with information about their health and well-being. And we know that the past 4 years have established the need to do that. Let's start with them on the right road to success. I love this webpage, the way Brad from LA Studios designed it. It's a great website, and we're going to continue to populate it with good stuff. So let me get down to this area, and I welcome you to check this out, the resources area here. And this is where you're going to find these notices of liability. I'm not going to go through them in great detail, but this is where they are. And if you click on here, you can get a chance to actually observe them. This is an abbreviated form. I'm going to go back for just a second here and just quickly scan over them. This is a parental notice that was drafted by an individual. And again, I'm not sure what the origin of it was, but it seems to have a great complex to it, and it's presented, I think, quite well. And these are the Action for Canada notices of liability, which are in a lot more detail oriented. I think it's important for you as parents and guardians of loved ones in the school system to know what it is that's going on. So there's 3 of them here from Action for Canada. This is a notice of liability on the pornographic books, the first one. This is the SOGI, the sexual orientation, gender identity, that's coming into the schools. And this is important. It's all over the country. And then the last one here is the school board follow-up presentation notification. So if you click on, for example, this one here, it'll open it up and you can read through it. And it's been really well prepared, as Action for Canada tends to do their material quite well. And it goes into great detail as to who the school district is. And this is all for you to print out and fill out and send. It explains what your concerns are in great detail. So for some of you, it's going to be an education in this matter, which I think a lot of us are lacking in, because we simply don't know what we don't know until we find out where we can know it. And I'm suggesting that the Action for Canada notices of liability, these parental consent forms, are a great way for you to get into what is exactly all this hype and concern about. And you can see in this detail here, and I'll try to enlarge this here, for example, it refers to the Criminal Code of Canada and the specific section which makes it illegal to sexually exploit children. That's valuable. We are giving this information directly from the Criminal Code of Canada, and it doesn't get much higher than that as where you are establishing your authority to take this action. And here again, you're filling out your name, your signature, and you're dating it. These were developed in 2022, along with a lot of other material that Action for Canada has spent vast resources, and they have some really good people in the form of lawyers and legal beagles that can draft this kind of information together. And it goes into, again, viewing pornography that affects minors, exposure to a sexually explicit material. This will be a great resource for you. But at the same time that you are serving this notice to the authority in your school, you're also giving them information that they don't know about. We have to step back and say, what is it? Who is involved, and who knows what they should know? Who doesn't know? I don't think a lot of our personnel in the schools know fully well what they're getting themselves involved in. Now, as I said on the program last week, and my guests affirmed it, these are not meant to be legal documents. You're not serving them with a legal claim. You're not, in other words, providing them with legal service, which would cause them to have to take action of their own. But what you are doing is you're establishing a baseline from which you have said, at this date, on this date, and at this time, I gave you notice. And that's important, because if you were to think forward on this matter, should legal action be taken in some form, either by yourself independently or as part of a class action suit? We don't know where this is going. But the judge will inevitably ask you, what did you do and when did you do it? What did you do to make the school aware of what your concerns were? When did you do it? And how did you provide that service, which it is a service, of this notice? And this is where you point to this document later. It becomes and can become very important, as we may look back and say, this is when I told you I was serious about it, and now we're in a legal action here against you, against the school board. That's important, but it's important for a later date. And as I said, this is explicit and very detail oriented. So for a lot of you, and there are references here that you can click on that are hot links to take you into other areas. Action for Canada has done a phenomenal job in preparing these for you to be able to take this and make it actionable. The first action is going to be to present it to the school. Do not send this with your child. You will never know if the proper authority received it. You must take the time out, fill it out, properly prepare it, and then take it yourself to the school. And if you know that there is a teacher who's complicit, as we pointed out in the matter of the teacher in the Western School Division teaching in the Ecole Morden Middle School, you want to serve that teacher directly and let them know that you are serious on this matter. How serious? Serious as a heart attack, I like to say. And they have been served. They may dismiss it. They will probably laugh at it and mock it. Don't worry about that. Lots of good things have been mocked and laughed at and have been later found to be of substance and significance. And this is that time. I want to encourage you, parents, if you're not prepared to take your children out of school, be prepared to take this action and serve the authorities in the school. And if necessary, if you feel so compelled, serve the superintendent of the school division as well. They are going to read it. Trust me. And if you want to take it up a notch, have this prepared on your lawyer's legal letterhead. You know, there's nothing more that says I'm serious as when you get a document, a letter that's put on your lawyer's legal letterhead. And you'll pay for that one, but it might be well worth it. They have to know that you're serious. They have to know that we take this serious. They have to know that the consequences to our children are serious. And this is one way I'm going to encourage you to do that. So get familiar. There's a download button here that you will be able to download it and then print it out and fill it out. Now, for those of you that would like a more abbreviated form, I came across this one as well, which I kind of like. And again, I don't know the origin of it, but it's pretty well prepared in terms as you read through it. Again, principal's name, school, you're reading all that, and you're concerned the name of your child, their proper name, of course, as you would agree, not their pronouns or any of that other nonsense. And then you read through this, that as the parent and legal guardian of your child, you're exercising your right under the Canadian Charter of Rights. And as you read through this, this is really well prepared, I have to say. Now, and it says what you demand as an immediate notification, what you do not consent to, and you are writing this out specifically and preparing it, and again, putting it in the hands of the principal. The recent changes, I'm going to stop my screen share here for a moment. I'll leave it up. The recent changes in the policy handbook that have affected all the school divisions across the province of Manitoba are significant. And one of the most significant things is that teachers have no obligation to report to you changes in how your child choose to identify in gender and in address. So, as we said, should your child adopt pronouns which indicate, in my mind, a confusion that doesn't actually exist, then you will not be notified by that teacher. Their only notification to you will come in the proper name of your child. So you have your child operating, functioning with different pronouns in school as opposed to the ones that you would normally associate with them. And the schools have really driven a wedge here between the relationships that parents traditionally have with their child, knowing what their children are being exposed to. And in the example I quoted you, on the opening day in that school in Morden, this teacher took it upon herself to ask the children, who had no interest, no awareness, no concern of any kind, what their preferred pronouns. You see, it's introducing it to create the problem. And that's what we should be concerned about. Our children are innocent for many years, and that innocence is all too quickly lost. But why is it that they are bringing this agenda to our schools? It's for a very sinister reason. And I can only say that as the situation deteriorates, it may be necessary for you to take a very aggressive action and remove your child from the classroom, as many parents have chosen to do. It's important enough to consider what the long-term effects are going to be for your child and take the action that is necessary now. So once again, these notices of liability are on the website, and I'll just click back here a little bit and show you. It's Thingsthatmatter.ca. You can see that at the form, and clicking on the menu opens up Caring for Kids. And if you scroll down this page, and I encourage you to read what we've posted there, you will come up with these documents that I encourage you to take action on. So, as I said, I followed up with what I said I was going to do. My apologies, it took a few more days. But caring for kids is a very serious matter and something that we cannot stop talking about as the situation continues to change. And like I said, there are many different movements underway, many different privately run homeschools that are done in people's homes, but also being done on a broader scale. And one such school I'm hoping to have on our program to discuss how it is that they came to the decision to place their child, take their child out of the school system and bring them into a more controlled environment where we don't have to be so concerned. Now, talking about school systems, we just celebrated a holiday, pardon me, I take that back, a day of acknowledgement and remembrance in the Truth and Reconciliation that was established in 2021 by our Prime Minister in recognition of the report that was tabled in 2015 and was accepted by the Prime Minister in the House of Commons and unanimously accepted by all parliamentarians at the federal level. This is a serious matter that our country is dealing with. And I want to say unequivocally that I am not here to challenge the Truth and Reconciliation and what happened in the residential school system that started in the late 1800s and ended with the final school being closed in 1996. If you have, like myself, read any of these horrible reports, there was some incredibly hard and horrible things that were done in these schools. The question I have is what is the go forward from this? Because we've established a national day, which I have no problem with. Of course not. I think it's a significant enough event in our history of our country to say that we are going to pause and remember, the I don't know the exact estimate of deaths that occurred. It's as low as in the 3,200 range, but some people suggest it could be as high as 6,000. The actual numbers cannot be known. And the number of children that were part of the residential school system numbers somewhere in around 150,000. If you do a little research into this, you want to ask, how did this start? Where did this start? And it's got an interesting history. But I want to say this, and it occurred to me back in 2021 when this day of remembrance was enacted. I thought, who are we as a country? Well, we are Canada. Some say we're not a country. Some say we're a corporation. Let's not go there for the moment. But let me say that as a country, we are a very young country in the view of the world. Countries have existed since the birth of Christ, the Roman Empire, Europe. We are, by comparison, an extremely young country. And when you go back into the history of why was it that the residential school system was adopted and put into place, the government at the time, back in 1867, were attempting to assimilate the Aboriginal, the indigenous people. They called them Indians back then, but those are all the different names that have come and gone. But we refer to these lovely people as indigenous people now. It was thought to find a way to assimilate them and to incorporate them into a classic European kind of ideology and culture. Now, we know the results that happen, and the reports exist that kids were forcibly taken from their parents. I did a little research into that, and you find a very skewed version of it, because some parents did surrender their children, believing that they were putting them into the care of somebody who could maybe provide more for them and do more for them, that they as children would have a better future. Well, if the saying that the road to hell is paved with good intentions, this one really makes the case. Because if there were any good intentions with the residential school system, they are marred by the memory and the testimony of people that have witnessed and given their testimony to this exhaustive report that's been prepared by the federal government and the Truth and Reconciliation Committee. Some 6,500 people were interviewed along the way. About $97 million was committed to working through this. It took years to do it. It is a voluminous 3,500 page report that exists in 6 volumes, and I believe that the final copy of it is in the University of Manitoba, here, right in Manitoba. But the interesting thing about it is the quick adoption of it by the federal government. And I want to bring forward, a slightly different perspective that I think exists. And I think it's important, that we look at this, because what happened is the federal government pretty much adopted it as it was presented, with very little information and very little questioning of it. So what's happened as a result is, when things like this happen, it's really important that we examine, the testimony of people. And I want to present here a report that was posted on the Frontier Center for Public Policy. This is a very reputable organization. I happen to know David Lease personally and heard him speak. And a lot of the people that have spoken here and write for them are quite well informed. And I want to say that at the end of this here, I'm going to go right to the bottom of it. The author of this report is right here. You can see it, Rodney Clifton. He is a professor emeritus, which means he's retired, but he is still recognized as having contributed significantly in the way of education at the University of Manitoba, and he's a senior fellow here for public policy. And this is an interesting report, and I just want to go through it with a little bit, because he points out that it was published a decade ago, which is true. It is 3,500 pages, as I mentioned. And there were some 94 calls to action that result from this report. And the problem, as we look at it, is it paints an extremely, if not 100% dim view of everything that happened in the residential school system. Now, statistically, is it possible that every child was a victim in the residential school system? I think statistically speaking, you would have to say, well, no, that's impossible. And you'd be right. But he does give a testimony here, and it's a very heart gripping one. This is by a lady whose initials are posted here. She was a student at the Anglican residential school. And this is her testimony. I'll read this part to you because if you have a heart, you can hear her heart cry here. She says, I remember was there. There was all these screams and there was blood over the walls crying as she's testifying. And we were told that if we were told or tried to run away, the same thing would happen to us. So this is verbatim testimony. So it was dangerous time for children and for me at the school that day, crying. We never really knew who would be next to be murdered because we witnessed one already crying. And a report like this, you would think would be properly investigated. But it is as horrifying as the testimony is. This account and the many others that were given have not been questioned, and that the people that would have been liable, that should have been held to account, have not been brought to task. And I did a little research on it. Why is it that nobody has been charged or arrested in the horrific accounts that took place in the residential school system? And it is disconcerting that commissioners never referred to the evidence. They never referred this evidence to the RCMP. What we have here, I believe, is a legitimate testimony. There's no question about it. But this claim, as he goes on to say, deserves special attention because it justifies the more fundamental proposition that Indigenous residential schools were genocidal and any student who did not die was a survivor. You know, we have to be discerners, especially in this culture and in this country under the present government. What really came to light that really put fuel on the fire was and he addresses it in this paragraph. The claim that the schools were genocidal has undoubtedly intensified since the spring of 2021, when the Kamloops band reported wrongfully, as it turns out, that ground penetrating radar had discovered the bodies of 215 students in the yard at the Roman Catholic residential school. So far, no bodies have been exhumed. There is no forensic evidence supporting the claim. Now, we have to be careful how far we go out on that limb, because he does not say that the bodies are not there, but he does point to the fact that the bodies have not been exhumed. What I'm doing here, and I have to be really careful because I do believe that kids needlessly died in the residential school system, and that the government at the time is completely liable for these actions, as are the individuals who perpetrated these heinous crimes upon these innocent children. The question is, how do we go forward with this? And what really is the truth? You see, when a report like this is tabled, it's imperative that we balance this report with a further exhaustive investigation to investigate the claims of the individuals. This has not been done. And there have been a number of writers, as this author says, have expressed their critical concern about the TRC report in a book titled From Truth Comes Reconciliation. And it's an assessment of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report. And this book attempts to stop our country's nosedive into a post-truth downward spiral on this very sensitive and critical issue. Folks, this is a critical part of our history. And I remember in 2021, as it was just around Canada Day, when the evidence of the graves in the Kamloops school were discovered, that Prime Minister Trudeau stood in front of the cameras demanding that the Pope come to Canada and make an apology to the people. And that many of our leaders at the time were so appalled by this discovery of bodies that they declined to celebrate Canada Day. And if I'm not mistaken, our own mayor at the time, Mayor Bowman, declined to participate in anything. Is it possible that through all of this, it is an attempt to turn ourselves against each other? Truth does bring reconciliation. The question is, how do we know we're looking at the truth? Without looking into it further, it's possible that we're only being given a version of the truth, one that supports a certain viewpoint. And I want to be clear again. I do not believe that these things did not happen. I do believe they happened. To the severity and the degree and the people that actually were involved, we will never know. Many of the people are not alive. It seems to be that it's almost impossible to hold anybody accountable for actions that happened going back to the 1880s. It's possible that we should be investigating this to see who's alive and to be held account. But it's also important to know that the Roman Catholic Church was only one of the religious organizations involved. The Baptists were involved, the Mennonites were involved, the Anglicans were involved. Where are these people today who know the truth and won't speak up about it? Are they alive? I don't know. But no attempts, it seems, are being made to investigate the validity about everything that is contained in the TRC report. I think that demands us to ask the question. And I want to say, to the credit of the Indigenous people, what we witnessed in Winnipeg alone on the Truth and Reconciliation Day was a phenomenal support of people coming together and remembering these atrocities that happened. I question whether those of us who are not part of the Indigenous culture can come together and make our concerns known about what's going on in our schools, about what happened in the COVID crisis and the deaths that were perpetrated upon us by these poisonous injections. What about the NCI report? Why is it impossible to bring that into the House of Commons? Nobody has presented that report, which is on the same basis of this report. And I don't want to mix the scenes up here, but I want to say, if this report has been so properly identified and accepted carte blanche, why is it that a report that was tabled by hundreds and hundreds of hours of testimony has no basis on which to be discussed by our parliamentarians? Is it entirely possible, as the author says, we're in a nosedive on truth in this country? Now, to bring this point forward and talk about the slippery slope that we're on, I want to bring something up here that came to me the other day, and I think it's important, so I'm going to bring it to you. Just bear with me one moment here as we pull it up here. All right, here's that, and it's going to start. So I'm going to then pause it for just a moment here so I can do the screen share. It's a lot of clicking going on here to bring this to you, but I want to bring this to you because this is being brought to you by your local government. So here we are. I'm going to have the sound up here on this one, and this is what I want to share with you. And have a listen to this interview.
Well, as we prepare to observe another National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, Leah Gazan, the NDP MP for Winnipeg Centre, is asking parliamentarians to pass her private member's bill. Tabled this week in the House, the bill proposes to amend the criminal code and add to it an offence of willfully promoting hatred against Indigenous peoples by condoning, denying, downplaying, or justifying the Indian residential school system outside of a private conversation. Now, according to the National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation, from 1883 to 1996, some 150,000 Indigenous children were taken from their families and communities and placed in government-funded schools. Thousands of those children died, and those who did not came back scarred by the emotional, physical, and sexual abuse suffered in those schools. Well, to talk about her private member's bill, we're now joined by Leah Gazan. Leah, Ms. Gazan, thank you for being here.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
Listen, I want to talk about the genesis of this bill. Where did the idea come from for you?
Well, currently in Canada, we already have in the criminal code, Section 318 looks at Holocaust denial. What my bill aims to do is add to that section residential school denial. I know that, the TRC, 10 years out, it's been about 10 years since the TRC, and we really saw a movement towards learning and change. But over the last couple of years, particularly since the discovery of unmarked graves, there has been an increase in residential school denialism. As you know, in the House in 2023, all members of Parliament recognized what happened in residential school as an act of genocide, as it fell under Article 2 on the UN Convention on Genocide. We know what happened. What happened is genocide. And the fact that particularly survivors have their experience with genocide up for debate is so violent. And I put forward this bill because I believe that survivors have a right to be safe from violence, but also to have their truth and stories protected.
Now, you turned to social media to share the fact that you are trying to get this bill passed, and it's hard to ignore the fact that it got some pretty strong pushback. And I'm not going to take it word for word because some of it is harsh, but I do want to carry forward some of the sentiments that were raised. For example, one person wrote that criminalizing speech is not a Canadian value. How do you answer that?
Well, certainly I believe in freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is one of the tenets of any democracy. Freedom of the press, one of the tenets of a democracy. There's a difference, however, between freedom of speech and hate speech. This has already been acknowledged in the criminal code in Canada. Certainly it's been acknowledged for Holocaust survival or the Holocaust. And I can tell you, as somebody with both histories, many people know about my history. My father was a Holocaust survivor. My whole family was killed in the Holocaust outside of 5 survivors. There is a level of relief to know that history, that there's an acknowledgement, that questioning that irrefutable history is not acceptable. Certainly that was achieved recently in the criminal code by adding Holocaust denial as a form of hate speech. I want that also for Indigenous peoples of Canada. As I said, all members of Parliament unanimously passed a motion recognizing what happened in residential school as an act of genocide. If we're going to reconcile in this country, then we have to honor the truth, and we have to protect those individuals that have been most impacted by this genocidal system.
Mm-hmm. Now, another criticism on your social media post. One person wrote, what you are proposing is too broad, their words, not mine. What you're proposing is too broad and suppresses good faith discussion. What do you say to that?
Well, I don't know if you're aware of this, but prior to going into politics, I taught at the University of Winnipeg, and in fact, one of the courses I taught was about residential schools. Many of the students that came in my course didn't know about residential schools, or maybe weren't aware of how bad it was there, the sexual, physical, emotional, cultural abuses that took place. I'm not talking about people that are learning. That's very different. This bill very clearly says the willful downplaying of residential school. I'm going to give you an example of that. I know Tom Flanagan wrote a book questioning the severity or the genocide that occurred in residential schools, questioning whether or not there truly is unmarked graves. What I have to say to that is, what school has a graveyard? First of all, what school do you know has a graveyard? Jim Keekstra, many years ago, was a school teacher in Alberta, went on record denying the Holocaust. He was fired. Canadians were outraged. They should be. Why? Because you should never question publicly, willfully, question a genocide that happened. In the Holocaust, what happened was a genocide. What happened in Canada is a genocide. Having people's history up for debate, genocide, something that has been recognized in the House of Commons, we must have no tolerance for. And again, there's a difference between freedom of speech and actively engaging in hate speech.
Now, of course, your bill was tabled just days before the National Day on Truth and Reconciliation, which will happen on Monday. Obviously, your bill gives something for Canadians to reflect on this weekend. But beyond that, what do you want Canadians to reflect on when the day happens on Monday?
Well, this is something that I know. I think most Canadians are committed to reconciliation. I think that the support that I've received as an Indigenous person, but the support that I've seen throughout the years and other work that I've done, including pushing for the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, people are good. They want to reconcile in this country. I know in Winnipeg during Orange Shirt Day, the thousands and thousands and thousands of Indigenous and non-Indigenous people that come out to support survivors. It's a day of reflection. It's a day to lift up survivors. It's a day to honor the stories and to take their stories into action. So as we honor survivors on Orange Shirt Day, I also want people to reflect on what are some things that they can do to realize true reconciliation in the country, both as an individual, but also as communities. And I have very, very good faith, strong faith in people across the country that that's exactly what is going to occur.
Leah Gazan, thank you for the time.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, I wanted you to hear that because that was actually tabled and it is making its way through our parliament system here in Manitoba. And I think it has several reasons to be concerned because it's another form of censorship in the way that you cannot question. And in the same way, as I just pointed out, this exhaustive report has not been questioned or even properly investigated. And when I say questioned, I mean being critiqued, being gone through and investigated for its validity, because we're talking about the testimony of people, many of which were children at the time that they witnessed it. And I truly believe that if we are to proceed in this direction of creating these kinds of laws that are going to control what you can and cannot say in this country. We already are seeing that. You see the control of the media to not be able to communicate actual news in this country. When did you think you'd live in a G5 country, G6 country, where you cannot communicate news to each other? We cannot trust this government or any of the present governments, especially the one in Manitoba here, with its agenda of censoring and controlling. I want to give you an example. This is a real example, and I think it points to the concern that is here that's being raised by this MLA. There was an incident that happened, and I investigated it actually because I was so shocked by it. I had to see for sure that it was true. So a group of people were gathered at a convenience store. I'll keep the names of the towns out of it, but it was very close to where I live in Winkler. And they all knew each other. They had known each other for a while. But of the three individuals, one of them was a man transitioning to a woman. And he had made very serious attempts. He had made great strides to try to accomplish that. He had been going through it for a number of years. And so he wanted to be recognized as and affirmed as a woman, but most people knew him as a man. In the course of the conversation between these three people that were not strangers, they knew each other full well. One of the individuals, quite innocently, and in the way that most of us would say, well, guys, I got to go. I'll see you guys later. Well, that's a fairly innocent statement to make. I walk up to men and women all the time and I say, how you guys doing? That individual, Truth, was visited at his home a short while later by the RCMP because the individual who was doing the transitioning had filed a hate crime complaint against the person that he knew for the reference to him as a guy. The RCMP showed up at this individual's home and said they were there to warn him. They were not going to ticket him, but they said, you need to know that what you said there is a new crime in Canada, and you can be ticketed to $25,000 for simply calling him a guy. True story. I investigated it and I couldn't believe it, but it was true. If we're going to legislate and control the way in which we disseminate information, the way in which we understand it, as this member wants to do, we are going to criminalize so many things in this country. And the attempt is to what? Silence the majority, to silence anyone who's a free thinker, who has an opinion of their own. You know, when the Allied forces landed in Germany, the commander-in-chief of the Allied forces said this, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard the story. He said, photograph everything, video everything, document everything, because someday someone's going to say this never happened. The evidence of the bodies and the atrocities that were committed during the Holocaust were verifiable evidence with pictures, videos, and huge graves of bodies there. They saw the evidence. Well, it didn't take that much longer that one of the world leaders, and it was Ahmadinejad, stood on the floor of the United Nations and declared the Holocaust to be a fabrication of the mind, that it never existed, to the horror of Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, who had to take that floor after him and scold the United Nations for allowing that to be said. You see, with verifiable evidence, we can know what the truth is. We can put those pieces together and say, we have a reasonable proximity of what happened. The question is, where do we have the evidence today to suggest that you could actually criminalize someone's opinion based on their understanding of what truly happened? Genocide is a word being used here very, very widely. She used it several times in the interview. Was it genocide, or was it the happening of failed health? Because tuberculosis was the number one cause of children dying in those school systems. And I'm only saying this to say that freedom of speech has to be protected at all costs. And to legislate something, to bring into happening a bill such as this, is to take us even further down a road that we don't want to go. I realize I took a chance in saying all that. My challenge to you is to be a discerner, to do your own investigation, to look into what you can find and read about it. Read the other side, read the opinion of a man here who wrote this post that I shared with you for the Frontier Center, and put it together and examine it. Is it possible that everything happened exactly the way it was told? Well, we know that a lot of people have given false testimony over the years, or have embellished that testimony to say what the prevailing notion is or the prevailing sentiment is. It is imperative that we continue in this country to challenge the evidence as you would do in court. See, this was not done in a court. This was done in the absence of a court, in a hearing, in a committee where people spoke with a lot of emotion. I witnessed that same thing at the NCI hearings. I heard a lot of people talking with broken hearts. Did anything come of that? No. Not one MP ever tried to present the National Citizens Inquiry into the House of Commons to adopt it as verifiable evidence of what truly happened in the COVID crisis. There's a double standard in this country. But again, I applaud the Indigenous people. They are very strong and very resolved, and they're not letting this go. The government of Canada has been dealing with this for years. The estimate amount right now, if you do a little research, is about $57 billion that has gone into Indigenous programs and investments and monies and grants and all kinds of stuff. Now, I want to point something out here, and I'm going to close on this because we're not going to get to the third segment that I thought I would. I'm going to share that on another night. I want to close with this. In the system today, Indigenous children represent, in our country right now, do a little research, of the young children, 15 years and under, they constitute less than 8% of the total children population 15 and under. If you go into the social, into childcare, into the system that takes care of children, you're going to find that Indigenous people represent almost 54% of the children that are in foster care right now. 7.6% of the children in Canada under 15 years are Indigenous. 54% approximately are in the foster care program are Indigenous. Why is that happening today? Are parents still giving up their children and trusting them that someone else is going to look after them? I question this. As a parent, you should question it too. At what point would you ever relinquish your parental responsibilities and your rights to give up your children? It's still happening today. Many of these children are placed into cultures that are not their own. And those children, I can tell you, in the COVID crisis, I know a lady who fosters 5 children. Every one of them is Indigenous. Every one of them got the jab with nobody to advocate on their behalf to protect them. Nobody was there to say, why are you putting that needle? She had no right to do it. She cried when she saw it happening, knowing that we already had evidence that this was nothing short of poison being put in our systems. The Indigenous people today are still under risk. They need to come forward and speak the truth about the other matters. And let's stand with the Indigenous people and rally. And why can't we have a rally for truth? The truth about what's happening in this country right now, the truth about Soji, the truth about what happened in the COVID crisis, and certainly the truth about what happened in the residential school system. Folks, it's important to talk about this. I am a purveyor of information. I am not in the story. I don't want to be in the story. And maybe tonight I've gone a little further than I normally do in the absence of guests to foist my opinion out there. But I am one guy, just one man's opinion. You need to examine the evidence for yourself. And we need to be discerners so that we can properly find the truth and that in all matters be reconciled. I would love to see reconciliation on so many fronts in this country. But as I said earlier, what country is without its faults? Canada is a young country. There are conversations underway in the United States to make reparation payments for the black slaves. How can you possibly do that? How is it possible to make that right? And the hundreds of millions of dollars that's being given to this, to cover this up and to deal with it, is entirely wrong in so many different ways. Every person that went through the residential school system right now, as long as they are verified and proven to have gone through it, is afforded a $10,000 payment right now from the government, has been underway for a long time, with an additional $3,000 for every year they attended in the residential school system. That is to say that every child that went through the residential school system is in fact a survivor of genocide. Is that statistically even possible? I ask you to question those things. And I thank you for this rather different version of Things That Matter, a podcast that I like to have guests on to get their expert opinion. But I hope that you have picked up something here that you feel you can go forward with to discover the truth and to empower yourself as to how to take action, especially in these notices of liability, the parental consent notices. I want to challenge you to bring a friend. Come here every week and check out our website, Thingsthatmatter.ca, for updates. And we're going to see you here again every week, as I am committed to being here every Thursday at our normal time at 6:30. And so I thank you for your time. I know there's other things you could be doing right now. And for those that are watching now and the thousands that will watch later, I thank you. And I hope These are truly some things that matter to you. Good night, and God bless you all as we search for the truth and become reconciled with it.
Imagine having no pain, sleeping through the night, having more energy, and reversing the aging process. Now imagine LifeWave doing that all naturally, without the use of harmful drugs. X39 is the most advanced patented light therapy in the world. LightWave is a simple wearable patch that you place on your body that stimulates the body to regenerate and heal itself. With more than 20 years of research and over 100 patents, LifeWave specializes in age-reversing all-natural health. Find out what the power of the patch can do for you. For more information or to join our LifeWave community, go to Thingsthatmatter.ca/LifeWave. LifeWave, reversing the aging process naturally without the use of harmful drugs.